everybody. Welcome to What I Did With Music Today During Quarantine with your host, Mr. Liss, aka KJ Liss, aka Kyle Liss. Today is Thursday, April 2nd, and something I didn't mention yesterday on April 1st was how glad I was that March was over. I think a lot of you might feel the same way too. With all this quarantine and the pandemic and everything going on, March felt like kind of eternal. So we made it to April, y'all. I'm pretty excited about that, I gotta be honest. So today I actually have a title, and I'm going to try to have a title from here on out as much as possible. The title of today's episode is In Search of a Sound. And to get us into that, I want to show you my t-shirt. It says Super, Ultra, Mega, Hyper, Meta, Lydian. And on the bottom, it says Jacob Collier. So if you don't know who Jacob Collier is, we're going to take a quick look at him over on YouTube because he's one of the most incredible artists of all time. I actually firmly believe he is the most musical human of all time. So let's check that out. Jacob is one of those freak of nature, unicorn, like dragon, mythical musicians who can do so many different things so well. Here's just a little bit of his song Hideaway, and you'll see what he does if you don't know him.
Whichever way the wind may blow, there will be a place for me to go in my heart.
I love, in addition to everything I mentioned about Jacob already, is that he has a sound. Not only as a composer, not only as an arranger, but also as a producer. So let's just take a minute to talk about some of the words I'm going to use in this episode, because hopefully some of you might not know them, and this might be some learning for you, because that's kind of the idea here. So in the past, there might be one person who composes / songwrites, and then someone else might be involved to arrange, and then someone else at the studio might record it, and then maybe the same person or someone else would mix it, so balance the tracks, EQ things, effect things, all that kind of stuff. And then there might be this other person called the producer who's overseeing the whole project and helping bring the vision to life. And in the past, those roles were pretty clearly defined, but these days in the 21st century, because of home recording technology, a lot of those roles have really blurred together. So for myself personally, with my own music, I serve as composer / songwriter. I serve as arranger. I'm recording all the parts for the most part. I'm engineering the music myself, meaning I'm the actual one doing the recording for myself. Then I'm mixing it. I'm balancing everything. Simultaneously, I'm the producer. I'm the one who has to have the vision of what I'm trying to create and the big picture view of what should this be building towards and what should this sound like. So it's a really different world than it used to be. And one of those things that I really admire about Jacob Collier is how much he has a sound as both a composer and a producer. So to illustrate that, I want to bring in a little Instagram video. Recently, another one of my favorites, her name is Kimbra, and Jacob Collier recently collaborated. For me, this is like dream come true, bucket list moment. Two of my very favorite artists collaborating on a song together. And Jacob posted this little behind the scenes look at their collaboration on Instagram, which was really, really cool. So let's go check that out and see what it's like for them to be recording together. This is a little behind the scenes look that Jacob posted about his work with Kimbra, and it was so cool because it's just like seeing them record in their kind of studio space. His studio space like reminds me of kind of what I do at home, but these are like Grammy winning artists who are just truly phenomenal. So check out this little look.
Woo! That's so Jacob Collier.
It is quite.
So it's this really fun moment of Kimbra reacting to Jacob's music that they're, collaborating on and saying, oh, it's so Jacob Collier, right? So again, going to this thing that he has, this sound. And for me, this whole producing solo music thing is kind of new. I haven't been doing it all that long. Previously, some of you might know, I played keyboards and wrote music for, and in general produced for a group called Indigo Sun. But back then, there were a lot of other people involved, and I had an incredible team. My literal family of musicians were there with me, helping guide that process and providing input and playing the parts. Whereas now I create this stuff on my own. I create a drum beat, I create a bass line, I create all the keyboard parts. If there's vocals right now, I'm usually singing them or using my vocoder effect on them. So it's a really new world for me, and I'm very much, it's been about a year I've been doing this, and really only the last last like 6 months in earnest. And so it's new for me. I'm still trying to find out what that sound is for me. So today we're going to look at what that process is like and how I'm in search of this sound. And I did a lot of work today to kind of get there, and I'm actually really happy with how that work is turning out. So I'm going to show you a song that is currently unreleased. It's called Through the Mist. I started it right at the beginning of our quarantine. So it's kind of like dedicated to this time. And it's a collaboration with me and an amazing guitarist, Justin Canavan from Chicago. If you don't know Justin, he plays with Jamila Woods, who is a Chicago-based singer. She's phenomenal as well. Got to check her out. He's internationally touring with her. But because of the pandemic, they had just finished their tour and they're at home for the foreseeable future. So I created this song. I wrote it really with the intention to feature his guitar playing on it. And it was really fun. He and I went back and forth. I sent him the kind of demo. He recorded guitar over it. And then we went back and forth and shared ideas. And he walked me through his vision. And I, told him my vision. And together we collaborated. And I'm really happy with the results. So we're going to jump into Pro Tools now and take a look at this. And I hope you enjoy seeing this inside look. Okay, so here we are in Pro Tools. This is my main piece of music software, also called a digital audio workstation. And this is where I do most of my real work. I create in a piece of software called Ableton, but I don't really like the sound of that piece of software quite as much as Pro Tools, and it's not nearly as powerful in terms of the mixing capabilities. So I eventually switch over to Pro Tools here. So the other day we looked at a really simple Pro Tools session where I just had one track. Here is a much more complicated one where, as you'll see, there's many tracks. And then over here you'll see a bunch of what are called plugins, which we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start by just playing the way this sounded last night when I was working on it before I kind of went in search of my sound today. So that's just a little bit of the beginning of the tune. So again, I'm happy with the mix. I'm happy with the way things are balanced, with the way the parts are coming together and all of that stuff. But what I was came to the realization of last night was that there wasn't anything too characteristic about the sound. Again, it sounds very kind of clean, a little bit sterile, and just not super, it wasn't grabbing my attention as a listener, especially when I put it up against this guy Kiefer I was mentioning, this really cool producer I've been super digging on for the past couple weeks. And so here's one of his tunes. In that process, then what I'm doing is I'm doing something called referencing. So this is a really common approach, a really common technique is to reference something else that you love the sound of and try to understand like, okay, what am I missing if I'm trying to go after that kind of sound? So when I listen to that Kiefer track, I immediately hear a lot more warmth. There's this like richness and warmth that is kind of intangible a little bit for us, but there's all sorts of things that can contribute to what we call warmth as producers or engineers. So that's one thing I hear. I also hear an effect that we call compression, which kind of balances loud and soft sounds, but can be used in these really interesting, subtle ways to kind of like simultaneously squash the audio and then bring it to life and expand it. It's a very interesting effect. So I hear this really great use of compression, and then I hear a lot of just like kind of noise, both in the sense of saturation, which is like exactly what it sounds like. We're saturating the audio with more just kind of richness and more what we call harmonics. But simultaneously, I also hear just a lot of noise, like vinyl or tape type noise. So what I did is I tried to take all those things into consideration, and we'll jump back into Pro Tools and look at what I came up with and how that sounds different from the original, much cleaner track that I showed. Here we are back in Pro Tools. There's 4 effects here. These are called plugins, and 2 of them are from a company called Waves, which is one of my favorite plugin companies, and 2 of them are from a company called Universal Audio Design. They're the one who makes the audio interface I have, which is called the Apollo X4, if you're interested. So the very first thing is a Waves plugin called the J37 Tape Emulator. The J37 is literally meant to emulate the sound of what it sounded like to record or run audio through reel-to-reel tape back in the day. And so this is an emulation plugin. And what I've done is I've disabled every plugin beyond the J37, so all these other ones, and I'm going to bring them in one by one and show you a little bit about them so that you can hear how they change the sound. So we're going to start by listening to what it's like without everything beyond, just with the J37. So already we're getting a little more warmth, and that's partly because what I did, I already actually had this J37 on the old kind of more sterile mix that I already played for you, but I had the noise level and the saturation all the way down. So noise is just literally creating some tape hiss, and then saturation is that thing we talked about earlier where it's adding some frequencies, some harmonic frequencies that just add a little bit more richness. So I turned that way up, the saturation and the noise, and that already made the mix a little warmer. Next, we have a Universal Audio plugin called the Fairchild 670. So this is an emulation of an old analog compression system called the Fairchild Model 670. And so it's this stereo compressor. And so this is adding more grit to the sound. That's another thing that the Kiefer sound had that I was missing, was just this more overdriven sound. Didn't mention that earlier. So here's the Fairchild and the J37 together. So already we're getting more warmth, more grit, that compression that we talked about earlier. Universal Audio has done this incredible job of modeling old analog hardware. You know, in a perfect world, I would have all this stuff at home, but that would be many, many thousands of dollars that I don't have. So instead, I have these awesome plugins. The next one in the chain here is called the Abbey Road Vinyl plugin. So this is emulating putting it onto vinyl. And so you'll see here, this is like the desk at famous Abbey Road Studios where they would print to vinyl before things were produced. And so this is emulating that kind of sound. So if you heard a little bit of hiss join the mix, maybe you're listening on headphones or good speakers, then that hiss is because I now enabled this vinyl plugin. So I'm adding from this some noise, some crackle, and I'm driving it kind of hard here, right here. I played with all these settings. This is brand new. I just got this, a demo of it today, and I think I'm probably going to end up buying it. So I played with all these settings up here, the cartridge settings, and the way it's generated lacquer versus print, and then the drive here. So I played with all those things, and here's what it's going to end up sounding like with that vinyl plugin. So for me, that vinyl plugin was huge. That was like a really big addition to this mix. I had a feeling it might be. I've been having my eye on that for a long time, but today I just decided to get the demo because I was in search of my sound. So that's why I picked that up, and that made a big difference. Not only in just volume, you heard it just got louder, obviously, but it got more driven. It got warmer. There's that little bit of extra noise and crackle that, you know, for so long, recording engineers and producers were trying to get out once CDs, and digital recording started to become a thing, late 80s and 90s. Stuff sounds so clean. But instead, I'm trying to put it back in because I'm trying to get that warmth and that grit. And then finally, the last stage here is a limiting amplifier. So this is, again, another replication digital model of this analog hardware by Universal Audio. And it's a replication of a limiting amplifier, which is another kind of compressor. I've turned the ratio up pretty high, so it's more limiting than compressing. And this is just, again, I'm driving the mix more. I'm getting that squashing, but that opening, and also just some additional volume and some grit on top. So with these 4 plugins activated, everything has so much more character to my ear personally. Let's contrast that for a minute with the beginning of the first mix that we listened to earlier. And here we are back to the newer one that I feel like embodies more of a sound that I can turn into my own kind of sound. So I'm hoping you can hear those changes. Of course, they are a little bit subtle, so headphones or some OK speakers are really helpful. But I wanted to just give you a little glimpse into the process of what I'm going through right now as an artist, trying to develop something more characteristic rather than just kind of a generic, more clean sound. I'm going for something, again, inspired by lo-fi music, including Kiefer, that I really, really love, but not quite as driven, not quite as distorted, because there is something about 80s clean production that I love. So I'm kind of trying to find the balance and what my own voice is as an artist. So I'm going to go back to Pro Tools, and I'm just going to let this song kind of fade out this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned tomorrow. Don't know what I'm going to talk about, but we'll find out.